A passage from Alice Hoffman's book called Here on Earth has been working its way through my heart lately. The book's main character is returning to the town that she grew up in, and on the way to her old house, which she hasn't seen for 20 years, she drives by a stone wall, and a memory comes back to her of how she used to balance on that wall, arms out, ready for anything. How she truly believed that she carried her fate in her own hand, in the palm of her hand, as if destiny was nothing more than a green marble or a robin's egg, a trinket any silly girl could scoop up and hold. How she believed that all you wanted, you would eventually receive, and that fate was a force which worked with and not against you. And that is not how things are now for her. A sense of weariness fills her, that stone wall that she passes by. It could still be a narrow passage that she could balance on, arms out, ready for anything. But there is no room for that in her life anymore. The past is holding the present hostage for her. She stays in her car. She drives on by, and the rest of that story unfolds. The rest of the story, which is about returning to your life. And what is that like when your heart is so full up with disappointments and resentments and hurt? And this is how the Alice Hoffman story expands to include every one of us. We don't need to resemble the book's plot precisely and be ourselves returning to the town we grew up in 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50. Every one of us returns to our lives every morning when we wake up. Every morning after sleep leaves us and perhaps dreams, history rushes back in, and we know ourselves again. And the fundamental question of the new day becomes, how much of this new day can I allow in? How much room can I give it to show me something new when old things are taking up the space in my heart? This is the deep, fun, spiritual question that we are engaging this morning. Readiness for renewal, readiness for authentic connection, readiness when there exist so many obstacles to readiness. And a major obstacle is that back and forth dynamic between a sense of entitlement and a sense of resentment. Grandiose expectations never fail to position us for disappointment. And that is something we heard loud and clear from Oprah just a little bit ago. As Oprah knows, that major aha moment, it is the ultimate in grandiosity to hold on to the hope that the past could be different than what it was. It is to think of yourself as having the power of a time traveler, which is grandiosity by definition. And we don't use the power that we do have, which is forgiveness. That is a power we do have. A sense of entitlement sets us up for disappointment always. I want to call that sense of entitlement, I want to call that the bed bug of the soul. The bed bug of the soul, a sense of entitlement. Because if you really think about it, you know bed bugs are really hard to get rid of. And they are really bad. Bed bugs of the soul. You know, some say that natural selection is playing a role here. Positive psychology researcher Jonathan Haidt, he is one of them. Natural selection, he says, is about creating winners in life. And there is evolutionary survival value to people overestimating their own virtue. Evidence shows, he says, that people who hold pervasive, positive illusions about themselves, their abilities, and their future prospects are mentally healthier. They are happier. They are better liked than people who lack such illusions. But then he goes on to say, such biases can make people feel like they deserve more than they do, thereby setting the stage for endless disputes with other people who feel equally over-entitled. To give just one small example. Well, I'm really curious what you think I was just about to say. So I'm just like, to give just one small example. There is a reason why when spouses or partners estimate the percentage of housework that each does, the estimates total up to more than 120%. Did it live up to your expectations? The point is, each partner has grandiose illusions, but how much they do, there's no humility, there's grandiosity. And that sets up the resentment cycle. You aren't doing unto me as I deserve. That is what stops us from wanting to listen, to hear a different side of things, to be at peace. Nature has put a tendency towards grandiosity in all our hearts. And there are other forces as well that set up the entitlement-resentment dynamic. And these ones, they operate on only some of us and not others. Womanist theologian Katie Cannon, she hits the nail on the head when she says that white people resonate to a perfectionistic ethic of self-reliance, frugality, and industry because it works for them. They do not encounter the extraordinary obstacle of interlocking oppressions in their quest for self-actualization or economic success. Whites can even dream of the nobility of voluntary cross-bearing. Listen to that. Voluntary cross-bearing, as when they can freely choose when to make a sacrifice, as when they can freely choose when they want to show up and when they're just going to step back and stay comfortable. But this makes no sense when in a black person's life the sacrifices are constant and no one's ever asking your permission and they are in fact coming to you at your lawn and burning a cross at your house. You did not ask for that. And this is not just about race. This speaks to class, this speaks to sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, and so on. When you are on the side of privilege, the vision of limitlessness can fill you up. And part of that is real. You really do have advantages that others do not. But then a part of that vision is also unreal. And that's what you have to learn the hard way. I can still feel the pain of slamming into my own personal limitations. When I entered college, I emerged from high school as student council president. I was in the academic top 10 of my class. I was the founding nerd or geek or both of a group called the IQ Booster Club. Okay, shut up. And I was also a doctor's son. I was a doctor's son. Medicine was the only career path I had known all my life. It was simply unimaginable to me that I could follow any other, even though in another compartment of my brain I wondered about what it would be like to be a minister. But this is what we do. We compartmentalize. We experience a balkanization of the brain. The different parts don't talk to each other. So I entered college with the purpose of going to medical school. And why not? The sky was the limit. Blithely and without any concern in the world, I signed up for the hardest science classes I could get my hands on. Honors chemistry, honors calculus. I was going to start it off with a bang. Oh. It ate my total lunch. That's what it did. It ate my lunch. All my overachieving, it got me nowhere. My head could not follow my professors. My head could not follow the numbers. It could not follow the experimental protocols. Other students seemed to be understanding just fine, but I was not understanding a thing. And this is where my perfectionism made my life a living hell. One day, I called my dad, and I was crying on the phone. I could not do this anymore, I told him. He heard me. He was kind. Although from that day on, our relationship changed. I was not going to be carrying forward into time his dream that he'd had for me, nursed all his life, that I was going to be a doctor to take up his career. And you know, whether or not and to what degree this disturbed him, honestly, what truly mattered to me was how disturbed I felt about it. I had failed. I had bought into the fiction of limitlessness completely and totally, the fiction that the world is mine on my own terms if I just work hard enough. And if I don't get what I want, I didn't work hard enough. I didn't do something enough. So it is my fault, and I ought to be ashamed. And that's a tough bing, 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 as Oprah would say. My social privileges as a straight white male remain. Because of them, there are truly fewer social obstacles that I have to deal with as compared to others. But this unearned grandiosity exists in poisonous tension with the lived reality of other limitations and failure and a shame that exists to this very day. The sense of entitlement, then the disappointment, then the resentment, and then the shame. The heart can be so full of all of these that nothing else can get in. You are returning to your life every morning upon awakening from sleep. The day is new. But then history comes rushing in. And there is little to no room for the newness of this new day to touch you. The Hasidic rabbi, Simcha Bunam of Zhisha, he once said this to his students: everyone must have two pockets so that he can reach into the one or the other according to his needs. In the right pocket are to be the words, "For my sake was the world created." And in his left pocket, "I am but dust and ashes." Yes, but it becomes a problem when a person reaches for the slip of paper that says, "For my sake the world was created," at the wrong time. That's the problem of grandiosity. When you and your spouse are arguing about housekeeping and who is doing what, and you pull out the "For my sake the world was created" slip of paper, and you press it into your spouse's face, that's going to be a bad argument. When you bump up against your personal limitations and you reach for that slip of paper that is in your right pocket and you make yourself read it over and over and over again, well, you end up feeling absolutely self-degraded. You end up feeling worthless. When you experience the discomfort of hearing a person of color express intense upset, even anger, about how, once again, something happened in their world, and they were rudely brought back to what it means to be a person of color in this country, and maybe you are the one who did the something, or maybe not. But either way, you experience great discomfort, and you are not down with that. You take a look at this slip of paper in your hand that says, "For my sake the world was created," and it makes you feel entitled to not feeling uncomfortable. And all of a sudden, you are the one feeling victimized. And all of a sudden, a moment that contained the promise of authentic connection craters, and things are even worse than before. The problem is reaching for that slip of paper at the wrong time. The right time is when our inherent worth and dignity is genuinely at risk. The wrong time is when we are indulging in grandiosity. You know, at UUCA, we are in a powerfully transformative time. This treehouse time is an interim time when we are relooking at things, we are reviving things, we are evolving things. And how we do social justice as a congregation is one of these things. I was talking to someone very wise about this the other day. He said that all congregations struggle deeply with the limitations of their capacity. There is a tendency towards a grandiose vision of having to be the most important player in town on all the most important issues. And this tendency inevitably leads to an inability to gain serious traction on even one thing. Consistent effort day in and day out is required. Substantial money and time are required. If we want to get to that, it is not a time to pull out the grandiose, for my sake the world was created slip of paper. It is humility that creates the room we need to help us achieve sober assessment of who we are, what we really are capable of, what specific form of brokenness in Atlanta that we could make a serious impact on. Humility creates that room. And as we turn to one of the most pressing needs in our larger world, and here at UUCA, once again, we need humility. The pressing need I am talking about is dealing with conflict. Humility is absolutely necessary because what grandiosity does in the face of conflict is act like conflict shouldn't exist. Because aren't we all mature adults? Aren't we all intelligent, advanced adults? Or grandiosity can make a person who is embroiled in conflict on all sides feel exempt from being held accountable. Who was the first person you're thinking of as I say that? I will not say his name. That's like really good. Right? That is out there. That is out there. Grandiosity does not take conflict seriously, and therefore we lack publicly recognized and respected rituals that help us mediate them. Now listen carefully. I was reminded of this while reading an article about ritual and the role it has played in some cultures to prevent conflict, or in case conflicts did break out, to mediate a solution that would satisfy both parties without having to resort to violence. Duels of the 19th century, right? Authors Kate and Brett McCoy, were not spontaneous affairs in which an insult happened and then the parties marched outside immediately to do battle. Instead, a duel had to be conducted calmly and coolly to be dignified, and the preliminaries could take weeks or months. A letter requesting an apology would be sent, more letters would be exchanged, and only if a peaceful resolution could not be reached would plans for the actual duel commence. And even then, only 20% of these affairs of honor ended in a fatality. Each side would deliberately miss, or they would intentionally aim for a non-critical place on the body. The authors go on to say, ritualistic combat to resolve problems may seem barbaric to us today, but its advocates at the time believed it actually reduced violence. Instead of a conflict pulling in each party's associates and turning an issue that was originally just between two people into an endless blood feud between groups and families, like the Hatfields and the McCoys, a person-to-person showdown nipped the problem in the bud and provided a clear resolution to all the parties. And now here is the main thing we want to hear this morning. This is it. Though the ritual of dueling died out, no alternative rituals outside the legal system emerged to replace it. And this has brought its own host of problems. As Carlin Barton, author of Roman Honor, argues, the absence of sufficient and powerful given rituals makes it hard in contemporary American culture not to be overwhelmed by the intensity of one's emotions or to respond to even slight challenges with anything but expletives. the formalized behaviors that would mediate between violence and passivity, that would mediate between the two, are lacking in our culture. We respond to humiliation by shooting one another or by watching television. The passivity of watching television. It is grandiosity that makes this okay for us. Grandiosity that tells us we are too good, too advanced, too Unitarian for conflict to erupt. So we refuse to humbly acknowledge the reality that conflict is a given in human life. We refuse to humbly do the legwork of creating communally accepted and respected rituals and practices that help, so that they are ready and waiting for us when the conflicts do erupt, which they will. No surprises. Last week, Taryn talked about chaos times. She talked about chaos times when our demons show up. And then she asked, how do we creatively engage those demons? Well, I want real answers to that. I want real answers to that. Problems in the larger world, the Voldemorts out there, problems in the larger world, their problems here, they're going to visit us here. We as a community are not hermetically sealed off from the larger world. But being beloved means we are bringing awareness and intentionality to these problems. Being beloved means we practice solutions. We do that here so that we can do it out there in our homes, and when we're doing our Facebook, and when we're at school, and what's happening in the legislatures, and anywhere else in the larger world. That is how we earn the word beloved. That's how we earn it. Now already we practice certain ritualistic gestures here at UUCA. We join hands for the benediction, right? And what that does is that symbolizes our unity. During the embracing meditation, I ask you to place hand upon heart, and that is about invoking love for yourself and love for others, love that heals the world. Now, some of us, we like to knock on the air like that. Now, how many of you don't know what this means? A bunch of you might know. That's fine. That's fine. So this is something that our youth do in youth group. And when you see someone doing this, they are telling you that what you just said is awesome. I totally relate to what you just said. That is what that means, right? So that is a ritualistic tradition that we have in our communities. Now, maybe a small but powerful social ritual that could be developed among us. Maybe that could have something to do with moments when we feel disconnection, when something has happened and it hurts, and we want to kind of press pause on things. We want it to be known that that didn't feel good. And perhaps that ritualized gesture could look something like this, because that does not signal connection, right? That does not signal this. It's this. We want more of this, but this happens. So what if we did this and included that in our ritual repertoire? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. For sure, one thing for sure is that we need to revise our congregational covenant. It's been in place for almost 12 years now, and lots has changed for us over 12 years. We also, for sure, need to revisit how we manage conflicts in our community, and we need to create agreed-upon rituals for how we do that. And no one's surprised when they're called in. No one's surprised. This is how we do our thing. And we definitely do not allow anyone to imagine themselves as exempt from being held accountable, because that is too much of this. Humility says no one is perfect. There is a time. There is a time to pull out the slip that says, for my sake the world was created. There is a time to pull out the slip that says, I am but dust and ashes. Now is the time to pull out this slip here at the treehouse. We are waking up to a new day. We are leaving sleep behind. The history of who we are is rushing back upon us, but we do not want to be overfull with that. We want to make sure there is space enough for newness to touch us and transform us. We want that, not to be held hostage by the past. Humility is the medicine that truly makes that possible.